What makes you think that I want to stay?
Just the way you're looking at me.
For Sharon! How's it going, guys? This is a BTS video of my latest short film, Charm Gauge. I'm actually not going to upload it onto YouTube for a while yet because I'm actually going to enter this short film in a few film festivals here in Ireland and potentially the UK. It's a really concept heavy piece, so hopefully you'll glean what it's kind of about and you'll maintain your interest until I actually upload it on YouTube. Okay, so let's get into it. So I'd like to preface this by saying that I made this short film on a €200 budget with basically no crew. The times when I was not in front of the camera, I was behind the camera. But I had a friend of mine who helped out with setting up the shots. Without, the actors that I cast and the friend that helped me out, I don't think I would have been able to achieve this short film within a 3-day shoot. That's the time I did it in. Why did I do this on such a limited budget with basically no crew? Well, there's basically 3 reasons for that. I started pursuing this filmmaking journey because primarily I'm an actor and I wanted some time in front of the camera and to really learn my craft. And so I've made a lot of microfilms and short films basically with no crew up until this point. This is kind of what I've always done, and so I've honed in on the skills of trying to cover these jobs that, frankly, I don't know that much about, but to get to the point where I can actually finish a microfilm or a short film and, get in that time in front of the camera as an actor. So the second reason is I don't have that much money. Well, I could, splash the cash on a short film, but I intend to make another one right after this. So that means is I want to keep the budget low so that I can make more short films. Hopefully at some point I'm going to make a feature film. That's the big plan, and then I'll actually have a budget for that one. And the third reason is I don't have that many contacts in terms of filmmakers. I have a few, but they wouldn't really be interested in, working on a €0 budget. So that's kind of the preface and the introduction to why I tackled this short film in this way. So let's get into pre-production. So the script idea kind of came to us, me and my writing partner, one day. We were joking around about when you're on a date with someone that you're actually really attracted to, and then you want another date, that the mind is in overdrive trying to make it run as smoothly as possible. And we're also talking about apps such as Tinder and Bumble. And so we kind of came up with this idea where not so charming guy get himself on a date with this absolute knockout. He would require all his faculties to seduce this woman, and this would be represented by a bunch of coalmen who we zoom inside his head, who are shoveling an inordinate amount of coal to try and boost up his charm levels to seduce this woman. So we thought that was a pretty funny idea and a cool and funny interpretation of modern dating. So once we got the concept for the script, it took us 4 weeks to complete, to come to a final draft of it. So that was 4 weeks of 4-hour days, 4 days a week. And it amounted to about 16 drafts. And I have to say, this is probably the tightest script I have written thus far. I've written 2 feature films before this, which were so-so, but I was learning the craft as I was writing those feature films. And so when I was doing this short film, it was all about getting it as tight as possible, that the shots just jumped out at you as you were, reading through the script. This then helped when we were composing the shot list, because there wasn't too much effort on the shot list part, because the shots were very much indicated by the script itself. This is a very visual piece, There isn't too much dialogue, especially in the scenes in the coal mine, but in the cafe scenes there's quite a lot of dialogue. So my point here is that it's mostly a visual piece. The script had to be very tight in that respect, and also it had to be tight in respect that we were only planning for a 3-day shoot. So that meant we had to cover the shots that we wanted to cover in the time that was allotted. So the next job that we went into was scouting the locations. So the first choice, the obvious choice for the coal mine, was my grandparents' farm, and my uncle actually lives there now. Sadly, my grandparents have passed away, but there's a bunch of sheds in that farm that I thought would be very suitable for the actual coal mine itself. So the other location, we needed a cafe or bar, so I was kind of concerned about that because I didn't want to splash too much cash to actually get that venue. The place I live in, Dublin, there's a couple of bars that we go to, and my housemate goes to one of these bars, quite regularly, and he knows his face very well and knows my face. So I decided to go down one day and just ask him for a favor, and then we had to organize a date, and he said he'd give me 3 hours of his time. So I thought that was really nice of him, but it only meant that we only had 3 hours to cover all the shots we needed in the cafe scene. So once we locked down the locations, then we had to decide on the shoot dates. So on the farm location, we could shoot those any days that the actors were available, and my friend was available. But the cafe scene really was up to the owner of the bar to when he would be free and available to let us shoot there, because he had to be there while we were shooting. So we decided on the 9th of February for that shoot in the cafe, and so that was a Monday. And then we would record the coal mine scenes at the farm on the Thursday, Friday. So that was the plan, which gave me time in the interim to set up for the farm scene, which I'll get into in a minute. There was a lot of dress setting and setups for that. So we had worked a little bit on the shot list, but I had to scout the location at the farm, at the shed, and I'd do a couple of test shots before I could complete the coal mine scene shot list, because we had a few challenges to overcome, such as designing a fake furnace for the guys to shovel coal into. And so I came up with an idea for that, which I'll talk later in the lighting section. So after scouting the location and understanding, the dynamics of the shed and having footage of that, then we started to really work on the shot list, which amounted to about 80 shots over the 3 days. And what was important about this shot list is that it was all timed out, so that it meant that we could cover everything we wanted to cover within the 3-day shoots, as we had limited time and there wasn't really any chance of us being able to, come back to those locations and shoot it again. So for the lighting and the set dressing, for the cafe, really I didn't do any set dressing for that. I really liked the location and how it looked. Like, basically that's why I picked that location. But the only thing is we were shooting against the window. So that meant we had to front light the talent to compensate. The 120D basically just compensated for the sunlight coming in. But what I had done is I had gone down to the location before we had shot a few days beforehand. The time that we were shooting, the sunlight was not coming directly into the window, so we weren't really having to compensate too much. And it was in the shade, so the sun wouldn't be changing too much. Is one of the things that actually I learned in going ahead of the short film, is when to shoot with window light. My only real concern for that cafe scene was that the sound would be bad because it was near the road and there was cars driving by. So that was just kind of my main concern in the cafe scene. So set dressing and lighting for the coal mine scene, that was really where I spent a lot of time thinking about, and I visited that location 3 times before we actually came to the shoot on the 13th and the 14th of February. So I had gone down myself the first day just to take sample shots of what I'd like. I wanted to have a set lighting setup, so I wouldn't have to change the lighting setups basically between shots. So what I came up with was 2 main lighting situations. One for the furnace, 120D Mark II with a lightning setting on it, so it looked like furnace was glowing, and I shot that into a 5-in-1 gold side reflector, and I put a CTO over the Fresnel head so that it bounced onto the talent and really gave that kind of fiery and glowing effect. I think it was really successful, because initially we were thinking of actually building a furnace with a real fire for the short. So I was really happy with that solution to that problem, and worked really well. My only worry there was that the coalman would have to shovel the coal into the corner of this trough where we did it, and I was slightly concerned that my 5-in-1 gold side reflector would be damaged and potentially the 120D might be damaged. But we warned the actors on the day to be careful and not to shovel really heavily when they were shoveling. So for the other lighting setup that was on me, I used my 120D and a C-stand really high up, and I had a silver 5-in-1 reflector over my workstation as my character as the shift manager. The Fresnel head bounced into that 5-in-1 reflector, and what was really handy about this setup is that I was hair lit or rim lit by the Fresnel head, and also I have a small RGB light with a couple of cool settings on. I can't remember the name of it now. It's actually lighting me here, and it has a candlelight effect which I lit on the key side of my face just to get that glowing effect of the furnace on my shots, which I thought was a really cool solution. So that was the lighting setup. So for any other shots that were not main workstation of my shift manager or the coalmen shoveling in, we just had 2 other cheap LEDs on light stands to fill in the deep shadows when we needed. So that meant that, we weren't doing many setups on the day, in that I had considered, with the shot list, considered all the setups that we'd have to do, and I felt as if that I could cover it all in the 2 days. But I was concerned that we would be pushed for time and I'd have to bring the actors back, but I was worried that I might not get them again because, this is a super low budget and it wouldn't be their, preference in that type of way, So I mentioned some of the lighting setups, but some of the gear that I used, some of the camera gear that I used was my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, which I'm filming on now. And obviously the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K is notorious for having terrible battery life. So I bought 4 10,000 milliwatt amp hour Sony batteries that I would cycle through. At the break time, I would put the batteries on charge and then come back and we'd use them again. So that was a really good solution to the battery problem. For sound, I was using my NTG4, which was plugged directly into Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K with a mini XLR mic, which meant that we were saving time and not having to hit record on my Zoom H5 recorder. In terms of lenses I used the 18 to 35 millimeter Sigma lens with the speed booster on the Blackmagic Cinema 4K. I have a 17 to 50 millimeter Sigma IS lens for handheld shots when I need the stabilization, and then I have a standard 50mm Canon lens 1.8 and 85mm lens, which I use for some of the close-ups. So before the shoots, I had some other animations and other various things that I need to prepare before the shoots. So the first thing was that I needed to design an animation for the charm gauge that would be displayed on an iPad beside my workstation desk as the shift manager. So I'm quite proficient at After Effects, so that took me from conception, took me about 3 hours to come up with the idea, and I think it looked pretty good. So I started off with a background layer and a shape layer with some notches in it, and then I filled it in with these shape layers for the various levels of charm on the gauge. And then I decided to put an outline on it. After that, I worked on the needle, which had rotation expression on it, and also a wiggle effect. So when it got higher on the gauge, the wiggle effect would become more exaggerated. And then I just filled in the titles here at the top and around the sides. So the other thing I had to do was make this blinking eye effect for a POV shot of the female talent, which would be displayed on the monitor, which the shift manager who I played in the coal mine scene would be looking at. We were seeing out through his eyes, so we needed this blinking effect. I also did that in After Effects, which I'll show you here. So I started off with 3 solid colors, black, red, and pink. And then I keyframed a mask path for each of the colors, so it would have a natural eye blinking effect, as you can see here. So let's get into the production. So I had planned on the shot list, and I put a lot of time in thinking about the timing and the schedule of the timing on the first day in the cafe scene, because it was paramount that I covered everything in that cafe scene, because I didn't think I was going to get another day in that cafe scene, and also would I get another day with the actors. So it was really important that I was really concise with the shot list, and that especially the setup time when I got down there, that we were setting up within 30 minutes or 20 minutes. As the director, I was on the location before the other actors, and I was waiting for the owner to open up the bar, and he was a little bit late for the day, but luckily I had planned for this and planned for other people's lateness. And so what I did was I set up a lot of the gear on the lights and the stands, plugged in the batteries for the camera, and basically I had it outside the car, and when the owner arrived I said a quick hello to him, and I just shifted all the gear inside and basically cut down the setup to about 15 minutes. All I had to do really then was just plug in my 120D light. That was pretty much everything I really need to do, and then organize all the other gear that I'd need for the entire shoot, just in a space where it wasn't going to get in the way. So the setup was like 15 minutes, which meant I had more time with the actors to kick off on the shoot, and we didn't waste too much time there. So the first shot we got into on the cafe scene was the wide, and I was really happy that we started with the wide, because this was the first time the actors had actually read the script out loud to each other. Now, I just want to say that I'm not a big fan of rehearsal, especially for camera. I think it's different for theatre, but for camera, what the camera loves is spontaneity and newness and things that the actors didn't expect themselves. So I feel anytime you rehearse something, especially with another actor, you lose that spontaneity. So you got to trust that the actors have done the work and that you're working with trained professional actors. And luckily all the actors that I worked with on this were really professional, really strong actors. I was lucky that I knew that these actors, I'd worked with these actors before, I knew they're really good. As soon as we did that wide, we had two really spontaneous, great moments that I actually used on that first take and that first wide in the actual final edit. So I was kind of happy accident in a way. So after we covered the wides, I was really happy with that. I moved into the medium shot on the female talent. She really tonally was there with the character, knew exactly where she was at with the character, and she was finding new interesting things that kept within the concept and every take. Now the only thing I had to direct her on, pretty much didn't direct her otherwise, was just to say a few lines with a certain concept, so that it would link to the engine room. That was the vital point I was making to her, and she did just that. And actually each take she did, the performance got a lot better, and I was really happy with her performance overall. And we moved on to the male talent. He was really funny. The lines came out so funny and much better than I had anticipated when I had actually written it with my partner. Problem there is that you try not to corpse on set because it's so funny, and then you can kind of get, and I've had this before, we can kind of get carried away with the funniness of what's happening, and you don't have the bigger picture. You kind of lose the bigger picture of what you need to have for the entire shoot in your mind. And so that kind of happened to me there, and I kind of lost sight of the idea that he needs change in energy from kind of awkward fumbling guy to sexual predator, and that change wasn't big enough. So that's kind of my fault, and if I was to do it again, I would make an explicit point about how that change has to be quite big, especially for the humor. When I finished the edit, I think that was the big thing that was lacking, the big change in his performance. But I'm going to take responsibility for that one. But overall, really happy with their performances. They brought on a day. Basically, I cast the right actors. Big part of the battle is that you cast the right people for the right roles, and they do all the work for you. So I had a pickup for that day, which was the male talent swiping on his phone. It was like a Tinder app, checking out the girl before she was going to come to the cafe once again. And I only did one take of this. Now I wish I did a few more takes of this to imbue more of the concept into the performance of him swiping. It's only him swiping, but there's still so much performance that can be had. That's what I've learned through making these microfilms and short films, that like every shot, even if your hand is in it, there's a performance there on the actor's part. The concept can be seen through body language, even in a hand, even in the way you swipe, which is a great thing I've learned through all of this. How you walk in a room, you need to have that concept in your head where your character's at when you walk in a room. You know, I wish I had done more takes on that and made the concept more rich. So when I got to the edit, basically I was kind of cornered into the options a little bit. I wish I had more options. Oh, it could be this, it could be that. And then I was a little cornered to what it could be from that pickup. A small little problem. But other than that, first day in the cafe scene went much better than I planned. I thought the lines would come out quite wooden with the actors, because I thought the lines were kind of wooden, but I had written them in a certain way so that they'd link to the engine room. Not that I intended for them to be wooden, but they had to be that way. But they came out really funny and much better than I anticipated. Once again, due to the actors bringing, a good performance. So the next 2 days after the cafe scene, I was setting up the farm or the coal mine scene for the 2-day shoot on the Thursday and Friday. I had everything prepped and ready to go. So the setup was only about 30 minutes when we got there on the Thursday, because my writing partner was actually acting in the piece as well, and he let me borrow some of his equipment. He didn't want to leave his equipment there overnight, so we had to set up his equipment, but all of my equipment was set up and ready to go. So it was only a 30-minute setup. So what I decided on the shot list is that I wanted the actors that I'd hired, for the job, that they could act straight away on that first day. So that meant that they could have a good time and enjoy themselves and get a bit of acting in before they had to do a lot of waiting, because most of the shots that we were doing that day, most of the takes that we were doing that day were actually on my character, the shift manager character. So I wanted to cover quite a lot of their shots before we got into, a couple of hours just on me, so they wouldn't be waiting around all day. So we started off with that, and I thought immediately, I'm doing a lot of directing here. I was operating the camera. Obviously my friend was there to help, and he was setting up the lights and he was doing some camera work himself. And I was like, I'm already tired and I haven't even acted yet. So then when I came to, my first shot, I had to, get angry very quickly and sort of snap. So I wasn't really in that headspace straight away, but fortunately enough, a couple of takes I kind of got there. But the switch over between director, cinematographer and actor, it can sometimes get you like that. Switching modes is quite difficult. We got that shot, it worked out, and then we did a few more quick shots on me before we did my main shots at the workstation, which would be where most of my acting would take place. And that acting would be sort of non-verbal acting, which is my favorite type of acting, because it's just thinking through the scene. And the camera really favors those who just are really thinking throughout the scene. So the major acting performances were done after that, and which is actually not much of the dialogue, it's mostly thinking through it. We did 3 different mediums on me there, which kind of covered all the performance for the entire piece. So after I finished the shots on me, I got 1 or 2 more shots on the coalmen, and then I got a few more pickups at the end of the day, just as the sun was coming down, just to get as much as I possibly could get on that first day. So on the second day, 2 or 3 more close-ups to finish on me with a couple of lines. Now, of course, on that Friday it was very windy and it was raining, and you could hear it in the shed. And so when we kicked off on the start of the day, I was really concerned that the sound was going to pick up on the mic, which it was. Couldn't really abuse the actors in the sense that, I couldn't have them waiting around. I didn't think that was fair, especially on a low budget like this. And so that, I kind of had to go ahead with the shoot. Worst came to worst, I had to come back to the shed myself and ADR it, which I could do that. But I thought that I potentially might not have to ADR it, because the climax of the piece was really coming up and there would be a score running through it and the furnace would be firing. The sound isn't perfectly clean, but you can't even hear it because there's a score running under it. But at the time I was kind of annoyed, because I was like, oh geez, these are my best takes and I might not even be able to use them or get clean dialogue on them, because it was the second day and it was then more into the character, and so I knew exactly where he was at. But I could actually use those takes in the end, so that worked out very well. So after I finished the takes on me, then I was going to cover all the coalmen scenes. Went pretty well. The only problem there was that they were very technically blocking heavy. So that meant is that it took a lot of takes for us to get it right in the money, because this is a very visually oriented piece and I wanted the actors to move and hit their marks right at the right time. while also having a genuine performance. If I had more time, I would have liked to have done more takes really to convey more of the concepts in the performances, but that was, you know, a time limit. Once again, I didn't think it was fair on the actors to really push that. And, you know, you don't really want to annoy the actors, especially when there's more things to cover after that. You know, killed my darlings a little bit there and moved on. I knew I had it. It wasn't where I imagined it could be, but I knew I had it in the bag. So then we moved on and covered some more pickups, finished out the day. And then there was a sound shot list, just the sounds, extra sounds of shoveling and other sounds of gauges and what have you. Actually, I never got the actors to be shoveling coal. Only actually in the wide were they actually shoveling coal. But in the other takes, I was just making them shovel air, and you couldn't really see it by the way we shot the angles, so that I'd have really clean sound in post if I needed to overlay some lines, and I could be the one choosing where I'd have the shovel sound effects coming in. So that was handy. And in recording the shoveling sound effects, I had to do many different variety of takes. One coalman by himself shoveling slow, then shoveling fast. 2 coalmen shoveling slow and then shoveling fast, and then 3 coalmen shoveling slow and then shoveling fast. So that would cover everything I needed to cover in terms of the sound effects. So the shoot days went much better than I anticipated. I anticipated one major thing going wrong, and basically all the problems that I needed to solve on those days, you know, problems did come up and I solved them one by one, but no major problems, no 1 or 2 hour problems that really set us back and would mean that we'd have to push the whole shoot onto another day, you know, and risk having to get the actors back again. But everything went really swimmingly. I think all the actors had a really good time. Everyone had a good time. A friend that helped me out said he had a really good time. What you want at the end of one of these sets is that everyone left it feeling like they contributed and they were creative. On each shot, when we finished the shots and we were wrapping up for the day, I would want to ask the actor to do the take that they wanted to do without any direction of mine, you know, within the context and the concept that I had given them, do the take that they wanted to do so that they felt like, you know, they were really contributing in a creative way. And I always feel that leaves the actor with a sense, you know, they had a good time and that they really contributed their voice to the piece, you know. So that's a little tip that I would give, you know, if you're directing actors. Give them a take that they want to do. I was pretty happy with my performance overall in the 2-day shoot, but I would have liked to have more time working on the character, but I was doing so much prep work before these shoots that I didn't have as much time as I'd like to do the character research, character background for my character. But I had done quite a bit, but a bit more would have been better, like as in seeing a bit more history in my eyes in the coal mine, such as how many years I've been here for and whatnot. But also that was quite hard to do when this is a very visually orientated piece, and the key part of my role as the shift manager in this scene, because it's very visual, was to link it to the cafe and to hit the beats, the story beats, the concept beats, and to think the right thoughts, concept thoughts at the right time. I'd like to have seen more history in my eyes, but I was happy with the nuance that I brought. You know, he hated it here in this coal mine, and that if he seduced a really attractive woman, you know, he might get a promotion and that he could move up in the world and get into a different cadaver, a much more charming guy who could seduce women easier in an environment that wasn't as bleak as the coal mine that he was in, you know. So that the stakes are really high for him to seduce this woman. The shift manager was a metaphor for the ego. You know, you need your ego to kickstart you on anything, but you need to keep it in check, or else everything will blow up in your face. So that was the idea for, you know, big grounding idea for my character and the piece as a whole, you know. Pretty much I was happy with my overall performance as a director and an actor, although there were a few things as a director I wished I'd took the time and considered more, but I had a lot of jobs to do, so I'd forgotten the moment. But my acting, I feel like I considered and brought a lot of the things that I wanted to bring. That's probably down to the fact that I have more experience as an actor and know what needs to be covered, and that the fact that I'm quite familiar with an edit, so I know what needs to be covered in the edit, which allowed me to, you know, act and direct kind of at the same time, if you get what I mean. So before I start any edit, the first thing I like to do, even before I watch all the footage, is I like to color grade each of the images to the best of my ability. Not complete them, but to get a sense of the film or the feel of the film through the visuals. There's a couple of reasons for this. One is that I actually really enjoy color grading. You know, it's something that I enjoy getting the tone and feel for the visuals. Relatively easy for me, and there isn't too many problems you kind of run into. So I always think that's like an enjoyable place to start an edit from, is to do the color grade first. And also, I don't think it's a good idea to start an edit on a raw profile like the Blackmagic Cinema 4K, or even putting on just a standard Rec 709 LUT. It's harder to see where this project is going to go and where your imagination could take you. I just think having those images looking pretty good right off the bat just inspires your imagination to where this piece could go, you know? So for those reasons, I think that's a good idea to start from that point. So let's jump to the computer now and let's go through my color grading process, which is developed over the last while, which I did on DaVinci Resolve. So here we are in DaVinci Resolve with the raw profile on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K. So I like to start with the parades open and just have a look at the exposure and the color contrast and just raw, and I'm pretty happy where this is at the moment. It'd be nice if when I lit it there was a bit more exposure on my face here, as you can see, just to have a bit more separation here from the background, but I'll be able to treat that here with my tree node. So the first node I like to add is just a basic contrast node to get it in the park. So I just added this basic contrast node, and then with the curves I just brought down the bottom end of the shadows just a little bit. So the second node I like to put on is the saturation node, and I really like to add a good bit of juice on this node. Obviously this is clearly oversaturated, but what it means for the next few nodes is that I have a lot of color there to play with, so I can push the colors in the direction that I want them to go. So then the next node I like to mess around with my primary wheels and add sort of a basic teal and orange look for this one. So you can see I've introduced a bit of blues into the shadows here, onto his black shirt, and here in the background. And now we're sort of getting that teal and orange look. Obviously the skin is too orange, and obviously the flames in the background too orange for me, because I want a kind of a bit of a desaturated look here in the engine room, but I'll fix that now in a minute. So the next bunch of nodes I like to do is a bunch of parallel nodes where I adjust the hue versus. So the first one is hue versus hue. And then I just added a little bit of teal into the blacks and the shadows here, just to give that more of that teal and orange look. And I just moved the reds here just to get a bit of a more orangey, glowy look. So the next node was a big important node for me, which is to bring down the saturation finally, so we don't look like Oompa Loompas. And so I just brought down the reds and the yellows here to sort of get us in the ballpark, and we're already getting close to the look that I like for this piece, this kind of desaturated but yet still a little saturated look. And I've kept the saturation in the blues and the blacks here, which is kind of the look that I like. So the next node was a hue versus luminance. Now this is a very subtle node, as you can see. I just took away a little bit of the brightness on the furnace back here in the yellows, just so it's not drawing too much attention away from our protagonist here. So the next window is an isolation window on the shift manager, just to bring his face out of the scene. So we're isolating on the shift manager because he is our protagonist. So as you can see here, makes quite a difference. And how I brought that up and out of the image was I used the curves
Just lifted shadows here a little bit and just lifted the midtones and highlights a little bit here as well. So the next node I did was I brought down the midtones using the gamma wheel on the primary wheels. And now we're really getting into the ballpark for the look that I'd like. The contrast has come down a little bit, and now it's starting to look a lot more cinematic just with this small adjustment with this look here. So the next window I chose to do, and the final window, was to further isolate our shift manager from the scene itself. So this is our focal point. What I did here was I put a window around our shift manager and I inverted it, and I brought down the shadows and the highlights of the rest of the image, so our shift manager really pops. So that's basically the color grading process I use for majority of the images in the short film.
So after I watched all the footage twice just to have it there in my memory, I wanted to have every image just floating around there so that when I come to the edit, I'm not searching my mind thinking, oh, is there a piece where he looks like this or he moves this way? That it's all just there backed up and, you know, in the back of my mind. I feel like I have quite a good visual memory. All the shots and all the faces that are pulled, I feel like they are there in the back of my mind and I can pull them out. So what was really interesting about this short film, which I haven't experienced before, you know, doing other microfilms, other short films, other personal projects that I've done, is I was cutting to the script. So the script was tight enough for me to basically read a line on script and place that line of that visual piece in the edit. I basically completed that first draft in jig time because it was basically just pieces of a puzzle in. And what was interesting about that was it was a healthy looking draft from the get-go, which I don't really experience a lot. As you know, the first draft looks healthy. This draft looked really healthy, which made me think, is this the way it's meant to be? You know, are filmmakers meant to come to the edit and literally they're placing the first draft in as if it were pieces of puzzle while they follow the script? I never went to film school, so I don't know some of these stuff that are potentially obvious. So if anyone in the comments section wants to drop a line saying, you know, that's the way it should be, a line in the script should be a shot, please let me know. But maybe it's one of these elusive obvious things that I'm just not aware of. So that was really great thing to find, and also makes me think that any other future projects that I do, I want that level of detail and conciseness to be there when I arrive at the edit. Okay, I know what this piece is. I don't have to find it. It's how I shot it. Also with the shots that you think there on the day and that are interesting and moments that come to you, of course, but there's a confidence there when you go to the edit. And I think I had that from the first get-go. So basically the next couple of weeks, 4 weeks, were just refining the drafts. And this was basically 4 hours a day of just testing out different ideas and trying to get it to a place where, okay, now we've got a short film. Yeah, now the concepts are coming alive. The bigger picture of the log line is now seeping through into the edit. So at the start, that's not that fun, but towards the end of it, there's an excitement there and there's an energy there that you're kind of getting to the piece that you initially imagined, you know? And that's really exciting because it's that idea where, you know, from nothing to something. You're getting to that space where it's now becoming something. So the next stage was for me to put in the sound effects. Now this is a huge part of this edit. The sound effects really bring it alive, you know, especially in the coal mine scene in the shed. So this actually took me a huge amount of time to get the right sound effects and make some of the sound effects. So I learned a lot there about sound design. Now this isn't something I'm an expert at, but I did learn a lot from what I knew previously in the last short film I did. And I spent, you know, about 2.5 weeks doing that just the sound design alone. Now the sound design was in it. I did a few more drafts to make the sound design and the edit work better together. And then I decided to then compose the 2 soundtracks. I wanted an original soundtrack for this. I didn't want to use royalty-free music. I just feel like it never fits the tone of your film, you know? And you feel that when you watch something like, this isn't the song that was made for this. And I feel like that comes through in the short films. Like, this was the song that was made for this. These are the songs that were made for this. In the last short film I made, I composed the track and I made other songs. So I was quite familiar with the program, but not too familiar. I'm learning and relearning at the same time, if you get what I mean. And I'm also learning how to make the sounds more cinematic and more dramatic.
So here we have the main soundtrack for the short film itself, which was all done in Spitfire Albion Orchestra sample library. What I really like about this library is that it sounds really good out the gate. And for someone like me who's not that experienced in composing my own music, it's quite easy to put together and get a cool song with little experience. So let's go through the basics of this soundtrack. So for the main melody of the piece, we just had these very simple high and low strings, which sound like this. And as the tension in the piece arises, I just added some more higher strings going up the scale to add more tension in the engine room. So very simple indeed. So now let's move on to the first melody, which is kind of an uplifting melody. Everything seems to be going well in the engine room. So this is this sample here. And then I added 3 layers of some basic cinematic drums, just to add that extra oomph, which sounds like this here. So for the second melody, when things start to go quite bad, I wanted a doomsday type of melody. Not much else changes here in the song, apart from there's more high notes in the scale for the strings section in pattern 1. So let's have a listen to melody number 2, which finalizes the track.
I'm really happy with the soundtracks. For someone who's not that experienced in this area, to get a soundtrack that sounds professional, I'm really happy with it. I'm sure someone who works in this area would say that, you know, you need to work on this and that and the other. But for me, I was happy with the result, and people I've shown to since, you know, and Rough Draft said, yeah, they were really impressed with the soundtrack. Especially any filmmaker who's interested in, you know, writing a score, I'd highly recommend doing it, because you probably learn actually a lot about the filmmaking craft, even, you know, vicariously through the process of writing score. Even if the score doesn't meet your standards, you'll still learn a lot about the filmmaking process. As they say, filmmaking is a 3-legged stool, you know, music, visuals, and dialogue, you know. So if that is true, then it's, as a filmmaker, it's probably worth your time to compose your own tracks, you know, especially if you're super low budget like myself. So with all the components in the edit, good looking edit, as far as I was concerned, I had the sound design in, and now I had the soundtrack and the composed music in. It was time for me to send off some rough cuts to friends of mine and my parents to give me an idea of what it looked like. Because, you know, no one had seen the edit up until this point. All very good feedbacks, there's great potential in the piece. Then I went off for another 2.5 weeks to refine those notes, and then I got those people to check again, and they had a few more notes for me to change here and there. And then ultimately at that point I could see there was personal preference in their notes, which was very valid, but came to the conclusion that I was going to finish it in the way that I wanted to finish it, seeing as I did pretty much all the post-production myself. So I finished that final draft, I sent it off, and those people who checked the drafts previously said it was really good and it was ready to go. So I was happy enough at the end. I felt like, you know, took the project right to the very end, especially now that we're, in isolation and lockdown here in Ireland. And I managed to complete all the post-production jobs myself. So, in conclusion, it took basically just under 2 months to complete the production, from conception of the script to the last day of shooting. That took 2 months. And the post-production took about 2.5 months to 3 months to complete, which ended up being a 5 minutes and 14 second piece. So it's a lot of efforts for 5 minutes and 14 seconds. Now, of course, I did the majority of the jobs myself, and if I had more of a team working with me, I would have been able to potentially complete it in a faster time. Who knows? But I'm really happy that I brought the idea from just an idea to a finished concept, which I think it's exactly how I imagined it would be. The idea I had in my head then was conveyed in the final film. Whether it does well or not doesn't really matter at this point. It was a success in the sense that I achieved what I had sought out to achieve. Even though this piece is only 5 minutes and 14 seconds, it really took everything for me to finish this short film, such as people dropping out in the last minute and trying to get other people in to fill in for the actors and what have you, stuff like that. But this BTS really isn't about that. It's about my journey in completing this short film on basically no budget and very little crew, and trying to achieve a piece of high production value. And I think I succeeded in that. Your concern making work yourself is, God, I'm not making enough. 5 months basically has just gone by and I've made a 5 minute 14 second short film, and that's all I've done. And you see these people making so much more work. But for me, that was the best I could do in the circumstances that I have currently for myself. And I put everything into it, every single part of it. When the acting, the directing, the editing, the composing, I put all of my skills to the max to try and complete and finish this piece. So I'm hoping in time that projects like this stand to me, But I suppose that's what it takes to make good stuff. It takes everything. I feel like I've postponed a huge amount of my leisure life in pursuit of my dream of becoming a successful actor, and hopefully now at some point a successful filmmaker and artist. The trade-off has been my 20s, and this is also 3 years of my filmmaking journey. And I'd just like to say, this is what you might be able to achieve, or maybe if you're more talented than I am, you might be able to achieve more, and if you have more context than I do, this is what you could potentially achieve in 3 years of pursuing filmmaking, going from not knowing pretty much anything and having no context, bar my acting ones, to making films that you're not embarrassed about, essentially, and that convey the concept that you wanted to convey. I've learned a lot of lessons through this whole process, especially on this short film. Learned a lot of lessons. I've learned a huge amount of lessons on the microfilms that come before it and the short films that I've done before it. And I hope to bring that in the next short film. And I'm already concerned about, how am I gonna, scrape the funds together to make the next film? Who am I gonna ask for favors to join me on the next film? And so on. And will I be able to do that? That's already an initial worry. But I'm sure I'll get there, as I've done it in the past. But for now, I should be proud of what I've achieved. Whether it's successful or not doesn't really matter, but that it was the max effort that I could do. And I hope this BTS video just gives you a sense of the whole process and pretty much every element of filmmaking, down to the acting, to even, the composing of the soundtrack. And if you're a beginner, really, this is going to suit a beginner filmmaker, maybe an intermediate filmmaker as well, that this gives you a real insight to the amount of work it takes to even do this in a 5 minute and 14 second piece. So thanks a lot, guys, for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Sorry that I can't show the short film right now, but I hope you enjoy the trailer that I have at the start. And I'll catch you in the next one. Throw me a comment down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And cheers, guys.